We have only one option right now, and that is to build to learn the lessons of what went down. And someone screaming from the roof about what was about to happen, who literally wrote the manifesto that predicted the way the Latino vote was going to go. We've had him on the network before. We've tried to get people to listen to him. He tried to get people to listen to him. He convinced some, but I don't think people fully heard the message. But he's been very vindicated, perhaps. The fact that he was so vindicated in the warnings, wish people would have heeded his call earlier. It's Mike Madrid, of course, political consultant, but the author of The Latino Century, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. Mike, you've been saying this was going to happen. You warned about it. You said this would be the difference in the election. And what we saw is basically the Biden lead amongst the Latinos in 2020 essentially just flipped. And that plus a few other things were, flipped in favor of Trump. That plus a few other things, that was the difference maker in where Trump found those votes and how he was able to turn this election. So I want to get your initial thoughts. Then let's talk about what we can do. But let's start with just your initial thoughts.
Yeah, well, first, Ben, always, man, love being with you. Love what you've built, the show. You're just the tip of the spear on all of this. And so thank you for everything that you've done. And it's great to build kind of a friendship with you virtually anyway over the years. I was taken aback myself as somebody who's been saying, this is the potential, this could be coming, red flags, let's pay attention to this. And again, we're looking at exits right now. I think when we do finally get the final numbers, it'll tighten up a little bit and it won't be as dramatic, but obviously it played a critical role in the outcome of the election, this Latino shift I'm talking about. We'll run through the nuances in just a moment, but I want everybody to know something and hear and listen to me really, really closely. This is all fixable. This is all fixable. There's very, very, very little data that I have looked at over the past decade, and that's how long this has been happening, by the way. We'll get to that too. But there's very little data saying this is becoming more conservative. The Latinos are becoming more conservative. That's not happening. That's not happening. Latinos in many ways are becoming more populist. That is happening. It's why I mentioned in the book, in the conversations that we've had, that Bernie Sanders was one of the only other American politician who drew huge numbers and big shifts and big supports away from the Democratic Party was Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't necessarily because of the policy prescriptions, it was because of the anti-party messaging. And that's going to have to be part of what I think the Democratic Party emerges as. But there's no question that there's a lot of angst, and this was overwhelmingly economic driven. The data is pretty overwhelming. We can get into the sexism, racism, misogyny, conservative religious stuff. Most of that in the book, anticipated and went in great detail to sort of dispel all that and saying, don't get caught up with that. If you focus on the economy and make these adjustments, there's a good chance you can get back into this. But those are the broad strokes. This is gettable, it's fixable. This didn't have to happen. It did happen. Now we're either going to be self-reflective and learn from it, or there will be 5 million new Latinos registering to vote in the next 4 years, or it will move another 7 to 8 points. And I'll raise the alarm bells again. You heard it here on MeidasTouch. If corrections aren't made, you will see Latinos getting upwards of 50%, maybe more in the next election. So got to really stay focused.
Mike, let me give you the talking point that you've pushed back on, and you've said you're seeing this issue all wrong when people in the political orthodoxy, the consultant class would say, look, of course the Latinos are going to vote for Democrats and against Trump. Trump's talking about mass deportations. He's saying he's going to deport their relatives. So they're not going to vote for the guy who's threatening to deport them and their relatives. To that you say?
To that I say, the reason why I wrote the book was to explain why this has been happening for over a decade. And the reason why is demographic. The vast majority, the explosive growth that is happening with the Latino vote is with third and now fourth generation voters. It's very important to understand that these voters, almost all of them under 30 years of age or older, have very little, if any, connection with the immigrant experience except for their grandparents. And I want you to put yourself in the shoes of these folks. If your grandparents were immigrants, or maybe even earlier, or maybe 100 years ago, right? There's a lot of people been here for a very long time. To talk to people exclusively through the lens of immigration, or to say you're all going to be deported, it doesn't matter, it's falling flat for people that aren't highly engaged voters and that aren't watching a lot of political news all the time. They don't believe, we can debate whether it is or not, I believe you should take a politician at his word, but the polling data shows overwhelmingly they don't believe that Donald Trump is talking about them. In fact, they think they're talking about the issues that they are equally concerned about, which is the rising number of undocumented people coming across the border. The change in Latino public opinion as it relates to the border is for increased border security. It's not for an increase in the pathway to citizenship or immigration reform. We do support those as a community broadly, but we have to pay attention. Kamala Harris made those adjustments for a reason. She would not have made such a dramatic change, nor Joe Biden in citing the asylum decree, unless the data strongly showed not just that all Americans are there, but Latino voters are there. So we're going to have to start talking to Latino voters less and less through this racial and ethnic lens, and get past the idea that everybody is consumed by immigration and how can you vote for somebody who wants to deport you and your family and your relatives and people in your community, and start recognizing this is overwhelmingly a pocketbook voter. This is an affordability problem. That same New York Times poll showed that only 20% of Latinos in the New York Times LA Times poll a week before the election said that the economy was good or excellent. 20%. So these are people that are struggling. It's not easy. It's not going well for them day to day. And it is a little bit easy, I think, to suggest that Latinos are the overriding factor is going to be these immigration questions, or that the S&P 500 is doing really well, or that Biden's plans, as he mentioned today, a lot of my plans aren't going to be felt for years from now. So I get it. I understand the frustration. I'm frustrated too. I spent 2 years along with you, fighting. We worked together, brothers in arms, in 2020. I get the frustration. It's why I wrote the book. I was saying, guys, this is coming. This is coming. And but I hope that's a good enough explanation. I think I'll be saying that over and over for the next few years so people kind of understand it. But this is largely a demographic consideration, that the stereotype of who we've known Latino voters to be for the last 25, 30 years is wholly different than Latino voters will be for the next 25 and 30 years. You've been, again, shouting it from the rooftop. We've had you on multiple times. We've been messaging that as well. And, while I was hoping to get that message out more, again, it appeared that we were moving against a lot of headwinds within the Democratic Party that was trapped in a mindset that seemed to be completely outdated. It's why you wrote the book. Let's get into a controversial area, though. There are some people who will say, and we should address everything publicly and transparently. Look, it was a woman who was running. It was a Black woman who was running. And is there something to that in a machismo culture? I mean, I've heard that before. So for me to ignore that in a discussion would kind of be me leaving out something that are the whispers behind the door. And I don't think that's fair to my community to ignore it, even if it's a controversial topic. And I'll give this data point, but then I'll throw it to you. While, as you always say, do not think about Latinos as a homogenous group. This Latinx label has been harmful as can be, lumping people together. But you look in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, you have a Jewish woman in Mexico as the leader. So that at least is one data point that they elected, a Jewish woman. By a wide margin, incidentally. But let me look, these are legitimate questions, and I actually include a chapter in each on my book because I think that they're that important. Let's talk about the machismo thing for just a moment here. The idea, and I'm getting this constantly, especially now, there's a lot of anger saying, well, it's all machismo culture and you're all misogynist. The two U.S. presidential candidates who did that best in U.S. history were Barack Obama, who got over 70% of the Latino vote, including the Latino male vote, and Hillary Clinton, who got 69% of the Latino vote, including Latino males. So what we're seeing is this movement away or towards the Republican Party and towards Trump, as I mentioned earlier, as a function of the third generation, which has the weakest ties to the country of origin. They have the weakest Latino anchor. 2/3 of them identify primarily as typically American, and by wide measures over their country of origin. They're Latino, they're Hispanic, but overwhelmingly they view themselves as typically American. That's when this emerges. So unless machismo is this recessive gene that skips 2 generations and then reemerges when everybody is identifying more as Americanized, it just doesn't hold water. If you believe that Latino culture was anti-woman and would never vote for a black person or a woman, then why, when we were a much more recently immigrated, naturalized voter, were we setting the high bar for a black man and a white woman? It defies all rationality. Moreover, and this is important too, Latinos elect women to office at rates higher than any other race or ethnicity in the country. Where we're from, Ben, California, there are more Hispanic women in the legislature than there are Hispanic men. Let me say that again. We've elected more women to the legislature than men. That is something that white women have not been able to accomplish since suffrage. And it's not just a blue state phenomenon. Texas is almost at parity. Florida's not too far off. Now, New Jersey, overwhelmingly women. So maybe there's a blue state advantage. But regardless, in every race or ethnicity, Latinos are electing women to office at higher rates than any other race or ethnicity. That has to count for something, along with the fact that our highest votes totals have gone towards women. And we don't even need to get into the subjective of the matriarchal culture of Latin American culture, because that's just the way that, as I argue in my book, the Latinization of America is going to lead to the feminization of America. And again, there's just overwhelming data to suggest that it's not only not true, it's the exact opposite. But I understand these are highly emotional times.
And then finally, among the highly emotional times, there is the blame game going around right now. And look, I have TikTok, so I see, what's sometimes being posted about Latinos who voted for Trump, and you see it on social media all the time. I think one of the things, though, that you've warned against is, look, are you in the business of trying to win elections in the future? Or potentially further alienate groups and push, as you said, there's going to be another 5 million Latino voters in this next election. So if you've done things that were perhaps not ideal, understatement, with the existing voter base of Latinos such that we saw this massive shift, 5 million more voters, if you're going to alienate and point fingers and push further away, just from a strategic standpoint, number one, you're making a giant misstep. But two, as you said, it's not a conservative shift so much as it is an issue shift. But I think that's where we should close this and then have you on much more frequently. But yeah, I think we hit all the key issues there.
That's right, Ben. And look, what I want, and I understand it's a highly emotional time, and there's a lot of, a wide range of emotions coming out. But Ben, you articulated it perfectly. I want to leave people with this. This is imminently gettable again. It's absolutely possible to get back to not just the 2020 numbers, which I don't think were particularly great for Democrats. It's entirely possible to bring them back to the high 20s. I'm talking about Republicans. Right? That you can move this considerably if we start to address this as the economic, populist, working class concerns that started the erosion in the first place. Again, remember, this started after the Obama era. This didn't just happen in 2024. It didn't just happen in 2020. It began years before that. And the good news is this has been, unfortunately, a response to the parties changing coalitions, but it's imminently fixable if we start speaking to those pocketbook concerns I saw Kamala Harris begin to do that, but you can't fix in 100 days what, a couple of decades worth of messaging in the wrong direction leads you to. So I'm hopeful. I really do feel that the party's going to get this, and I think it'll be pretty quick as it goes through this process of trying to understand and learn about the direction to go in. I think you're going to see a lot of Latino leaders, hopefully a Ruben Gallego in Arizona, my good friend Alex Padilla in the U.S. Senate, Catherine Cortez Masto. These are all future leaders. There's a very good bench of elected officials, Latino elected officials that can really meet the moment, step up and rise to the occasion and help the party fix this problem. And I think they will.
Everybody, make sure you get the book, The Latino Century by Mike Madrid, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. It was prophetic. I would say I wish people would have read it in real time. They did, but I wish more people would have, because you were spot on. But look, it's never too late to acknowledge a problem, learn from it, and then adapt, right?
That's exactly right, Ben. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 4 million subscribers, and thanks for watching.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm to suppress political content. Please follow our Instagram @MeidasTouch right now as we head towards 400,000 followers so you don't miss a beat.